Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're doing something a bit different.
Yeah.
Instead of just, picking apart articles, we're going to pull back the curtain a little on interviewing, specifically for a business analyst role.
Ah, okay. Good topic.
Think of it as getting the inside track. Maybe you're thinking about this career. Maybe you're just curious about, what actually happened?
Wait, how it all works.
Exactly. We've looked at typical interview questions, some advice on the process, even some real experiences people shared online.
So kind of a 360 view.
Yeah. And the mission here is to unpack it all by sort of simulating parts of an interview to help you understand what matters, how to think about it.
That makes sense. It's not just about knowing the answers, right? It's understanding the why. What is that interviewer actually looking for? How do you show you've got the right stuff?
Precisely. So let's try it. Let's imagine. You're the hiring manager. I've just walked in. BA role. What's up first?
Okay, welcome. So first things first, I want to make sure we're on the same page about what a business analyst does here. In our view, the BA is, they're a crucial bridge. Yeah. You're connecting stakeholders from all different areas, right? Marketing, IT, ops. They all have their own goals, their own language sometimes.
Makes sense.
Your job is to really get what each of them needs and then figure out how that lines up with the bigger picture, the overall business strategy. It's about balancing those needs, finding that sweet spot so we move the company forward together.
Okay, understood. So thinking about that, my background seems like a pretty good fit. My degree, let's say it was in business information systems, really hammered home that connection between tech and business needs and, talking to stakeholders. And in my last job at Tech Solutions, Inc., I was always in projects working with different teams, like marketing and the dev team, trying to define and build things.
Can you give an example?
Sure. There was this one project. Marketing was seeing lead conversions drop off from the website. Big problem. So I worked with them, really dug into the data, mapped out the user journey, found the sticky points. Then I took that to the developers and we outlined changes to the site, the back-end systems that fixed the user issues and helped marketing hit their goals.
And the result?
We saw a definite increase in lead conversions, better user engagement stats too.
See, that's a really good way to frame it. You didn't just list duties, you presented a problem, showed how you were involved in finding and implementing a solution. That's gold for an interviewer. That's what you listening should take away.
Right, focusing on the problem solution aspect.
Exactly. So building on that, what would you say are the essential core competencies for a BA? What absolutely has to be there?
Okay, core skills. Well, number one, probably communication.
Yeah.
Has to be exceptional. You're talking to tech people, business people, users, all different levels.
Crucial. What else?
Negotiation skills, definitely. Because those different groups won't always agree. You need to find that middle ground, manage expectations. Then, obviously, strong analytical thinking, problem solving. You have to be able to break things down, look at the data, find smart solutions.
Right.
Decision-making comes into it too, though maybe more collaboratively. Having some industry knowledge helps a lot. And understanding business process management, how stuff actually gets done in a company.
And technology.
Yeah, and finally, like a certain amount of technical proficiency. You don't need to code usually, but you need to understand what's possible, what the limitations are.
That's a pretty solid list. And it's interesting you put technical proficiency last, almost. For anyone listening, the level of technical skill needed can really vary. Is it configuring software or helping design something totally new? That's something to figure out about the specific job.
Good point. It's not one size fits all.
So following on from competencies, what about specific skills? And maybe tools, what's important today?
Right, skills and tools. I kind of see two buckets, technical and non-technical.
Okay.
Technical side, well, MS Office, Google Workspace, that's just baseline, right? Everyone needs that.
Yeah.
Database knowledge is often really useful. Just being able to pull data, maybe knowing about ERP systems, enterprise resource planning, the big systems that run finance, supply chain.
The backbone systems.
Yeah. And then increasingly SQL is a big one for querying databases and BI tools, business intelligence like Power BI or Tableau. We see those mentioned a lot online.
Definitely hearing a lot about Power BI and Tableau.
Then the non-technical side, really strong documentation skills, clear requirements, clear processes, and requirement elicitation, that whole skill of actually getting the needs out of people's heads.
The getting it out part is harder than it sounds sometimes.
Totally. And understanding business process management techniques fits here too.
That's a helpful split. And it really highlights that you need both, doesn't it? For anyone listening who's thinking about skilling up, maybe getting some basic SQL down, Just enough to pull data. And getting familiar with Power BI or Tableau seems like a smart move based on what people are saying online.
Agreed. It seems to come up a lot in interviews.
Okay, you mentioned databases and SQL. Can you tell me how you've actually used those skills?
Yeah, sure. So, in a few projects, I've needed to get into relational databases. I'm not a DBA or anything, but I can write SQL queries,
Okay.
like that marketing conversion example I mentioned. I use SQL to pull the raw website traffic data, see where users were dropping off in the funnel, even slice it by demographics.
Ah, so you used it for the analysis part.
Exactly. That data directly pointed us to where the problems were and helped us build the case for the changes we made to the website forms and flow. So I've used, say, PostgreSQL before, understand data modeling basics. And I'm always keen to learn whatever systems a new company uses.
That's the kind of practical answer we look for. Not just, I know SQL, but here's how I used SQL to find something important. And showing you're willing to learn the specific tools we use, that's always good to hear. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Are you familiar with the acronym INVEST in terms of requirements?
Invest. Yes, I am. It's a really handy checklist for writing good user stories or requirements, make sure they're actually usable.
Right. Can you break it down?
Sure. I is for independent, the story should stand on its own as much as possible and is negotiable. It's not set in stone. There's room to discuss. V is valuable, had to deliver real value to someone, the user or the business. E, estimable, the team needs to be able to guess how much work it is. S is sized appropriately, not too huge, small enough to fit in an iteration, usually. And T is testable. You need to be able to prove it's done.
Excellent. Yeah, knowing INVEST shows you understand how to create requirements that actually help the team deliver quality, manageable work. It's a sign of understanding good practice. Okay, let's talk elicitation again, getting those requirements. Tell me about your experience in those meetings. What techniques work well for you?
Right, elicitation. I've been in a lot of those sessions. I find, honestly, that using a mix of techniques works best. You can't just rely on one thing.
Like what?
Well, starting with document analysis gives you a baseline, what exists now. Then, one-on-one interviews are great for digging deep with key people. Prototyping, building a quick mock-up that can be amazing for getting real feedback fast.
Visuals help.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Brainstorming sessions can generate ideas. Workshops provide structure for groups. Sometimes just observing people doing their jobs tells you things they wouldn't think to mention. And surveys, maybe, for really broad input.
So you pick the right tool for the job.
Pretty much. I actually read about a scenario, kind of complex, trying to gather requirements from like 15 different departments for one system.
Wow, yeah, that's tricky.
And the approach they took, instead of endless meetings, was to identify process champions in each area. Train them a bit on gathering needs, let them do the first pass in their teams, then bring the champions together for workshops to consolidate everything.
That sounds smart, efficient.
Yeah, seemed like a good way to handle that scale. Shows you need to be adaptable, especially with lots of stakeholders.
Absolutely. That adaptability, knowing your elicitation toolkit and figuring out how to navigate those complex webs of people, that's a huge part of being a successful BA. Okay, scenario time. What do you do if customer requirements just keep changing constantly, mid-project?
The classic scope creep situation. It happens, right?
It does.
First thing is making sure there's a change management process, a clear one. And everyone knows what it is, how you propose a change, how it gets evaluated, impact on time, cost, scope, and who approves it.
So process first.
Definitely. Then, constant open communication with the customer. Why the changes, what's driving them. And if a change is approved, it needs rigorous documentation. Then you have to reassess the plan, communicate the impact.
Makes sense.
I'd also push for prioritizing requirements. Maybe using something like Moscow, must have, should have, could have, won't have. So if changes come in, you can have a sensible discussion about trade-offs against the most critical stuff. It's all about managing expectations.
Good answer. It highlights documentation, communication, expectation management, all core BA skills. All right, next challenge, difficult stakeholders. We all encounter them.
Right.
How do you generally handle those situations?
Yeah, difficult stakeholders. Yeah, it takes patience. And empathy, I think. First step is always trying to understand their perspective. Why are they pushing back? What are their underlying concerns? Often it's because they feel unclear about something or just not heard.
So listen first.
Absolutely. Active listening. Acknowledge their points. Try to find common ground. Keep communication clear and consistent. Make sure they know what's happening, how it affects them. If views really clash, I'd try to facilitate a discussion to find a compromise.
And if that fails?
Then, if necessary, you might have to escalate to the project manager or sponsor, but that's usually a last resort. And actually, when talking about this in an interview, using the STAR method helps.
Ah, yes. Situation, task, action, result.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's you give a concrete example. Here was the tricky situation. Here's what I needed to achieve. Here are the specific actions I took to listen and communicate. And here was the positive outcome. It makes it much more tangible.
That's excellent advice. Using STAR for behavioral questions is definitely a strong technique. It gives structure and proof. Okay, let's touch on Agile quickly. Familiar with it. How does it relate to business analysis?
Yes, definitely familiar with Agile. Understand it's all about iterative development, flexibility, collaboration, getting feedback early and often.
Any specific frameworks?
Yeah, I know the main ones, like Scrum with its sprints, daily stand-ups, planning, reviews, retrospectives, and Kanban more of a visual flow management system, limiting work in progress. I get that Agile is super common now, especially when requirements aren't perfectly defined up front.
Good. And thinking about tools again, specifically for the analytics part of business analytics, we mentioned Power BI, Tableau. Any others you're aware of or have used?
Well, beyond the basics like Excel, which is still used a ton for quick analysis.
Still the workhorse in many places.
For sure. But yeah, for real BI, Power BI, and Tableau are the big names everyone mentions. I know there are others too, like ClickSense, MicroStrategy. There's significant players in that space.
Yeah.
My hands-on expertise might vary, but I know they're important, especially Power BI and Tableau. Seems like you often need at least familiarity with one of them.
Right, just being aware of the tool landscape is important, shows you're keeping up.
Yep.
Now, shifting slightly based on some of those online forum discussions, one manager, Dagmara 56, I think it was, really stressed honesty, like being okay saying, I don't know, but I'll find out. Thoughts on that?
Oh, 100% agree. Business analysis is complex. You can't know everything. Admitting you don't know, but showing you're proactive about finding the answer, that shows integrity, a willingness to learn. Much better than trying to bluff.
Makes sense. They also mentioned liking to see extracurriculars, thinking it might show teamwork skills.
Yeah, I can see that. Being involved in a team sports, volunteering, whatever, it can demonstrate collaboration, contributing to a group goal, maybe even leadership potential, sort of that servant leader idea of supporting the team, gives another dimension beyond just work experience.
Interesting perspective. Okay, one last point. We've focused on this kind of Q&A format today, simulating that part of the interview. But it's important for you listening to know that case interviews are also really common for BA roles.
Right, like the ones on sites like I Got an Offer,
Mm-hmm.
where they give you a business problem and ask you to walk through how you'd solve it.
Exactly. So definitely something else to prepare for if you're targeting BA roles.
Good point. So, wrapping up our simulated chat here, we've hit quite a few key areas for understanding the BA role through an interview lens.
Yeah, we talked about being that liaison, needing that mix of technical and soft skills, knowing methodologies like Agile, being familiar with tools like SQL and BI platforms, and maybe most importantly, communication and problem solving.
And hopefully, for you listening, seeing it from the interviewer side, what they're looking for, like critical thinking, impact, how you communicate, helps you think about how to prepare effectively.
Definitely. So reflect on what parts of this BA role sound interesting to you. Maybe check out some of those resources we touched on, case interview examples, training options, if this feels like a path for you.
And just remember, even if BA isn't your specific goal, understanding how interviews work, how skills are assessed in a field like this, it gives you valuable insights. The core things, clear communication, solving problems, understanding concepts, those are useful absolutely anywhere.
Well said. Food for thought, definitely. Consider how those principles apply to your own path.